second half of chapter 1, section 1, is to be able to produce a graph. And yesterday we talked about what is a function and what isn't a function. Today we're going to go ahead and graph functions. I'll go ahead and let you know that you're not going to give me anything in today's lesson that fails the vertical line test. So we're just going to practice graphing functions. If you'll recall from yesterday's lesson, what we actually did was we took a little bit of time in class to verify points were solutions. So, and you all did very well with this on your homework. I didn't have really anybody squeak about, getting a lot wrong on the homework, so you did a nice job there. So I now know that my very smart period 6 college algebra class can produce a point and potentially plot it. Well, what we're going to go ahead and do today is find a bunch of points to produce a graph. So we're going to move from just one point from yesterday's lesson to several points for today's lesson. I teach this in 4 steps. Okay. So this is my point plotting method. It's actually also 4 steps in our textbook. If you needed to refer to it, it's on page 70 and 71. But step 1 has you solving the equation for the dependent variable. In other words, we solve for y. In today's lesson and in tonight's homework, that step is already done for you. So my emphasis for today isn't on the algebraic manipulation you need to do to solve for y. We'll cross that bridge in another couple days. All of these equations are going to be solved for. It's going to be y equals something. Okay, my emphasis for today's lesson is on the rest. In other words, how do you find the points? That's what we're getting at today. So what we're going to go ahead and do in step 2 is we're going to construct what we call a table of values. Your teachers in the past probably called this a T-chart. They might have called it a T-chart if you'll recall. I have a couple of rules for constructing a table of values. You do the problems like I do the problems, right? When we make a table of values, you need to take up as much of that x-axis as you can. So in other words, you want some negative values, 0, and some positive values for x. So that's what goes in those blanks right there. It is important to try to use some negative values, 0, and some positive values when you're working things out. Jonathan, can you put that away for me? Thank you. So some negative values, 0, and some positive values for x. In step 3, you're going to plot the points for that table of values. So when you go ahead and you make your table of values or your T-chart, you're going to produce some points. You then plot those points. And in the last step today, we're going to go ahead and connect those points with a line or a curve. All right, so let's do it. Giddy up. In example 3, it says sketch the graph of this equation. So the equation we're going to graph in this example is, you might recognize that as a linear equation. It's in y equals mx plus b form. So you kind of have a snapshot maybe of what this graph is going to look like already. We're going to graph the equation y equals negative 3x plus 7. To follow the rules for the T-chart, you need some negative, 0, and some positive values. So what we're going to go ahead and do is do negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. So I have some negative values, negative 2 and negative 1, 0 for an x value, and then positive values 1 and 2. And you're going to do kind of the same thing on your homework tonight. In addition to picking some negative, 0, and some positive numbers, you also want to pick numbers that are easy to work with. A little tip there. So for instance, if you see 1/4 as the coefficient of x in your problem, you want to pick numbers that are easy to take a fourth of, like 4. 1/4 of 4 is 1. Or let's say your function has a square root in it. You probably want to pick x values that you could take a square root of easily, like 4. Square root of 4 is 2. Or 16, the square root of 16 is 4. So in addition to picking negative, positive, and 0, it's not too bad of an idea to pick numbers that make your life very simple. So you want to kind of use a little bit of a path of least resistance, if you will. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to substitute these x values into this middle column, into this particular equation here. I usually get asked a question right around now. Mrs. Lucas, on my homework, do I have to show the middle column? The answer to that question is no, but you do have to show scratch work for how you get your points. Usually what I'll see students do is they have x in the first column, y in the second column, and then some scratch work for how they got their points. If that's the way you'd like to do it, hey, you go for it. But I do a middle column so that you can kind of like connect, you could see at least what I'm doing. You could see that I'm going to take my x values in this left column to produce y values in this right column here. So here's how that looks. I'm going to do negative 3 times x, which is going to be a blank right now, plus 7. So wherever that x is, I kind of open up a blank. That's my variable. I'm now going to vary the values of x. So I'm going to go ahead and copy down this equation a couple times because I'm going to evaluate this particular function for 5 different x values. And now what I'm going to go ahead and do is take those x values from the first column and just plug them into the parentheses in the second column, because these were my x values. I'm using my property of substitution to plug in those numbers for x. So in those blanks right there, I have negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. That's me just quickly plugging in my numbers for x there. And then to get the last column of my t-chart, those are going to be my points. Remember, my x values were already defined from the first column, basically from our previous step in the problem, where we were taking some negative values, 0, and some positive values. To get the y coordinate, real simple, we're just going to follow the order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So in other words, I'm going to go ahead and multiply negative 3 times negative 2 first, and then add on 7. If I multiply negative 3 times negative 2, that's 6. 6 plus 7 is 13. And then I have to do negative 3 times negative 1, that's 3. 3 plus 7 is 10. Negative 3 times 0 is 0, plus 7 is 7. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, plus 7 is 4. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, plus 7 is 1. So now I have some points that I can go ahead and plot. Remember, you don't write it down if you don't understand it. Does anybody not understand what I did up there? I just constructed what we call a table of values. What's up, Ben? Do I have to answer your first question, which is, do I have to use negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2? The answer to that question is no. The rules that you want to follow, Ben, are you want to pick some negative values, a couple of those, 0, and some positive values. As long as you have about 5 values, it should work out just fine. Okay. Now to answer your second question, like I think it was, oh, it just went right out of my head. What was the second? It was like 2 parts to your question. Okay, so how do I determine which ones to pick? Good question. I want to pick numbers that are nice and easy to work with. So I picked negative 1, negative 2, 0, 1, and 2, just because they're really small and easy to work with. I was kind of referencing earlier, just because you asked. Let's say on your homework tonight, you're asked to graph y equals the square root of x. Make your little t-chart. You could try to do numbers like negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. But what happens is some of those values don't actually work out. So you want to pick, besides negative and positive numbers and 0, you want to pick numbers that are nice. For instance, I can't take the square root of a negative number. That's undefined. Like, it's not undefined, I'm sorry, it's imaginary is what that's called. So you're not going to have any points there. The square root of 0? That's an easy one, so I would use that. Square root of 0 is just 0. Square root of 1, that's 1, so that's also easy. But the square root of 2 is a messy decimal, so I probably wouldn't actually keep that value. I would probably pick something else that's nice to take a square root of. Can you think of another number that we can take a square root of, Ben? 4, yeah. Square root of 4 is 2. Or you might do square root of 16, like you want to pick numbers that are nice and easy to work with. You want to make your life as simple as possible. So that varies depending on the equation. Do you know what I mean? Okay. All right, anytime. Any other questions? Really good questions, Ben. All right, so now we plot the points, right? I see most of you jumping on into that step. just a quick review, because I think all of you are very good at plotting points. You know our points go x, comma, y. So we plot out the values on the x-axis first by going right to left. And then we go up or down based on our y values. Remember, if x is positive, we go right. If x is negative, we go left. If y is positive, we go up. If y is negative, we go down. Okay? So I'm going to start by plotting the easy one down at the bottom here. Use a cute little pen. I'm going to go ahead and plot the point 2, comma 1. So 2 is a positive number. I'm going to go to the right 2 spaces and then up 1 space. So there's my first point. And then I'm going to plot the point 1, comma 4. So you go over 1 and up 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go over 0 and up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'm going to go over negative 1 and up 10. And then over to negative 2 and up 13. So a little bit higher. And then the last step of the problem here, step 4, says connect the points with a smooth line or curve. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. Right there. What I see is that each of these y values was decreasing by 3. That's because the slope of this equation, I don't know if you remember this or not, all of these values decreased by 3 because of that slope. Furthermore, I have a question for you. Do you see this point 0, 7? Does anybody know what that's called? The Y-intercept. Very good. It's actually the B value in our linear equation. Why I'm throwing it out there now? Hey, the rest of this chapter is about linear equations like y equals mx plus b. So you see that we get this decreasing pattern here. Each of my y values decreased by 3 each time. That talks to me about my slope. My y-intercept is 7. That talks to me about my b value. So that's kind of nice. Okay, questions about that one? All right, let's do it again. Make sure it sticks. That was Ben's square root question. All right, example 4. I'm supposed to sketch the graph of this particular equation. Notice the equation's a little bit different this time around. We have y equals x squared minus 2. X squared minus 2. So Ben, since you asked, what values would you pick for this one? It is pretty arbitrary. You want some negative, 0, and some positive. Anybody else? Go ahead, John. I would too. Yeah, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. I would not pick a number like 10. Because if you think about it, this is a squaring function. And I have to graph this stuff. Who are we kidding? If you're going to square 10, that's 100. I don't really feel like plotting points out to 100. I don't know about you. I know Rick doesn't. For sure, that face says, I'm not going to go ahead and plot up to 100. So yeah, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to pick some negative, 0, and some positive. Ed's face might say the same thing. All right, so we have negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. I have y equals x squared minus 2. I'm going to go ahead and substitute in my value, or my varying values of x there. Here's how I show this. I go blank squared minus 2. And do it 5 times. And then what's going to go into that x right there, or into that blank, are all of the values from the first column. So I'm just going to shove them in there. We have negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. Next step. I'm trying to write ordered pairs here. I know that all of my x values come from the first column there. And then I have to do my order of operations to find the values in the column for y. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Remember when you square a negative, it does turn positive. Yeah, so we're squaring all of negative 2 right here. Negative 2 times negative 2 is actually going to become positive 4. 4 take away 2 is 2. Negative 1 times negative 1 is 1 minus 2. That's 1 minus 2, negative 1. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. 1 squared minus 2 is going to down to negative 1 there. And 2 squared is 4. 4 minus 2 is 2. And now I can plot those points. I think I'll use a star this time. So I'm going to plot the point -2, 2, -1, -1, 0, -2. There's that Y-intercept we talked about. 1, -1, and 2, 2. And then that makes a U-shaped graph. Anybody remember what that U-shaped graph is called? You, Chris. It is a parabola. Very good. And that's in general our point plotting process. Very alliterative. Point plotting process. All right, so now you get to practice. I'm going to start walking around to check off your homework from last night to make sure that's in good shape. You folks are going to take care of the independent practice problems for me. My slideshow's out of order. So there's your independent practice problems. You have A, B, and then if you feel pretty good about them, I'm going to show you how to check them on your calculator here in a minute or two. If you feel pretty good about these, you can go ahead and summarize your conclusion question there. Okay, so we just typed in our equation and we checked to make sure that the pictures matched. So now what we want to go ahead and do is check to make sure our calculator will produce the same table of values that we produced manually. So to check our table, we press table. Do you all see what that button is? It's second and graph. And notice my table of values starts at -2. Yours might start at different values. You can always change that, you know. I could show you how if you need it changed. But my table of values starts at -2. So your table of values, you were probably using the same ones I was doing today in class, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So you would have points like -3, -1, 1, 3, 5, and 7. So your table of values can be checked with this table of values. Does anybody have any questions, like maybe their table of values doesn't match or you got wrong numbers? What's up? Okay, so a couple of different ways. One way is to scroll. So you just hit your up or down arrow, like that, or down. So that's one way to change it. You just kind of scroll through the table. Another way to change it, because we're going to do word problems next week, when we deal with numbers that like meh aren't so nice. If you want to change it in a big way, all you have to do is press second and table set. It's like the settings thing on your iPhone, you know. This is the settings for our table, so we press table set. What we're going to go ahead and do is change where our table starts. So Tessa, you wanted your table to start a little bit bigger than mine. You wanted it to maybe start, or smaller than mine, right? So like, let's say you wanted it to start at -5. You could have it start there. And let's say you wanted to scale it by 5s, count 5, 10, 15, 20 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. That's that right there. So that's kind of nice, and you see that my table reflects those changes now. So it's really neat. You can make that table of values whatever you want. So that's what your first independent practice problem should look like. The second one I also have up here. The second one, part B, should be a U-shaped graph. And then your table of values is also there. You should have your conclusion question also answered before you leave me today. We go for no blanks in our note packet. Does anybody have any questions about our lesson today or anything like that? Nikki, what's up? I want you to be able to still do the order of operations. Like some of us are still banging the rest off of the substitution and then the order of operations. So I want you to show me a little bit of scratch work for getting those points, not just copy it from your calculator. Is that what you were asking? Oh. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I think I misunderstood your question.